I don't know why Pastor Graham picked me to do the past. I was thinking more of the future.
It was kind of slim pickings.
Oh, that's slim pickings. They were slim pickings, and I was still his third choice. Okay, we're going to take a walk down memory lane. I just want to hit some themes. 1973 is when the church started. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but first I'm going to talk about when my family arrived here and what it was like, Nampa and the church. We got here in spring of 1981. That was many, many years ago, right? Okay, trivia question. In 1981, what was the last stoplight on the south side of Nampa?
Amity and 12th, I bet you.
Nope.
No?
No, there was none there. Until there was a high school student killed by a car, and then they put a light in.
Okay, so it would be 7th and
Ellison's at 7th and 12th. That
7th and 12th.
was the last stop light in Nampa. So Iowa Avenue, when the church was planted here, we were not in the city. We were in the county. If you go from here to 12th Avenue, it's that one house that's a lawyer's office now. Sumner Johnson, he lived there. The Seventh-day Adventist church was there, and I think the pizza place on the corner. Maybe it wasn't a pizza place, but there was something on the corner. Going that way, it was all fields except for some of the older houses on Midland. You see when you drive Midland, there was a few of those. But that was it. We were in the country. When we drove up, first of all, the church here did not look anything like it is. You know, we've done a couple expansions. I'll talk about those, but especially the front. The parking lot was not paved. It was just gravel. There was no nice grass between the parking lot and the road. It was just mainly weeds, and we tried to keep the weeds down. And so when we drove up, down by the Seventh-day Adventist church, there was a line painted on the road. And then right here, you know, by where our church sign is, there was another line painted on the road. We soon found out what that was for.
Quarter mile.
Quarter mile. Weekend drag races. And the finish line was right here at the church, so our church parking lot was full of high school kids watching the drag races. And, you know, they were drinking and smoking, you know, whatever. And guess what Iowa Avenue was called by? Why do you think it was drag races right here on Iowa Avenue? Because we were in the county, it would take like an hour for the sheriffs to get here. Because I tried it once. Anyway, guess what Iowa Avenue was called by the high school kids? This was a trivia question. What?
Drag alley?
No, Stony Lane. So that kind of tells you a lot. So we were really a country church at the time. Fields all around. The church used to own the house in the back here, and that's where the pastors lived, so we were there. The kids loved it because they could play all day on the irrigation banks, and we did not know about them, and they were just playing, had forts all over the place and everything. The kids loved it there. So anyway, so I want to hit a few themes. I think the first theme I want to hit about the history of Messiah, it began as a regional church. It's kind of interesting why it came to Nampa. They did some exploratory work. A pastor from Oregon came and held some services. They held some around the Payette, Ontario area, and they would have like 30 or 40 people there. And they would hold another set of services at Emmett, and they would have about 30 or 40 people. And they had nobody in Nampa. A family moved in shortly before they planted the church, but they had nobody in Nampa. So why did they put it in Nampa? Because they really wanted to get into Boise. Although they had nobody there. So they put it in Nampa, they figured they could cover the whole region, which probably did not help very much. But it was a regional church for, I would say, a while. When I got here, it was obvious that, especially the group of Ontario, We're not too happy, even not then, 8 years later, that the church was planted here, you know. So what happened, because we really wanted to get into Boise, for about 5 years in the mid-'80s, we held services every Sunday in Boise, Nampa, and Ontario. So I would do the circuit, start in Boise, come to Nampa, teach Bible class, have church, go up to Ontario, have confirmation class, Bible class, and church, and then drive home. That was for about 5 years we did that. So we were a regional church. And after that, we held services for a year and a half or so on Mount Holm Air Force Base, serving the military. We actually had a group of about 18. We met at Colonel's house. And then we also, had, for a couple times, held services in Gooding, because we had members in Gooding. Roy, I'm just trying to think of the people who've been here the longest. Roy, do you remember the Stoltzmans?
Yep.
The Stoltzmans family would come from Gooding. They would drive in twice a month. He was our choir director. They were very active. And so we had 2 other families in that area. So we started to hold services, but again, that didn't take off. So in the beginning, we were really the only church in Idaho. Well, I got the call. There was a small mission in Pocatello, but that shortly did not survive. So we were basically the whole Church of Idaho for a while. So we were kind of serving at least from Ontario to Twin Falls. We were serving. So that's the first thing. We were a regional church. The big thing I really want to emphasize is that throughout our history, we have been an outreach church. Years ago, when we got here, we wanted to reach into the community, and so, how do you do that? In the 80s, and still, I'm still not saying it's a lost thing to do, but we did a lot of door knocking. Some summers, I think it was almost every Saturday we went out, all summer. There was a group what we did, we had a group of about 15 people who regularly went out. We had another group, about a dozen people, supporting them by making meals, a lunch, some prayer support, things like that. So we actually had, because the congregation then was not very big, so that was a pretty good percentage. But because of that, that's where we started to get some people coming in. Tanya's not here. I still remember knocking the first time on her grandma and grandpa's door. Tanya was grandma and grandpa's door, and the first question her grandma asked me was, if you drive a beer truck, can you be a Lutheran?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Her brother in Tennessee or Kentucky was excommunicated from the church because he drove a beer truck. So I remember that quite vividly. Tanya, there was numerous members. Some of you might remember Roy Squires. Yep. There's been numerous members we knocked on their door, and they came. But one technique we tried, and we tried various techniques, was farming. What we would do is go to the same neighborhood, like every 6 weeks, and we would give them a gift. Yardsticks with our name on, refrigerator magnets. One time before Easter, we gave them a little plant. One gift that did not go over real good was we had matchboxes that said, "Set your faith on fire," and we gave them to all the kids in the neighborhood. That did not go over very good. But because of that, because of going door to door, we naturally hit a lot of LDS families. And that's really where we got the impetus to start the outreach to Mormons that eventually morphed into many years Truth and Love Ministry, which John now is the head of. But it really started from knocking on doors, and we said, what are we going to do about that? But that's another whole complete story, so we're not going to go down that route. But we really wanted to get into Boise, so talked to some of our members who were living in Boise, gave them a choice, do you want to be part of a new mission or that? And, we got enough interest that, in, I forget, in the mid-90s, we called Pastor Steinbrenner, who became the first missionary over to Boise, and he started Cross of Christ, which was a big step for Nampa, for Messiah. Because at that time, we gave them almost our complete church council, not completely. But I still remember this quite vividly because this was a topic of a great discussion. At that time, 39% of our offerings went to Boise. I mean, the people who were giving those offerings, 39% of that. So that was a pretty sizable hit for Messiah. But the Lord blessed it. Again, the Lord blessed it, raised up new leaders, raised up new people, and so forth. Around the same time, a little bit later, but we were already working with the Vietnamese people, Peace and Jesus. Anybody know how that outreach started?
Probably with refugees.
Refugees. I came back from vacation one year, and one of our members unexpectedly sponsored a refugee family. I guess they were flying over and the sponsor family backed out while they were on the airplane, so one of our members jumped in and sponsored them, so they started to bring them to church. Other members said, hey, this is not a bad idea. So we had about, the Strickler sponsored one, I don't know if you guys remember, the Loring sponsored. We had numerous members sponsoring Vietnamese families over here. So we had them, but they were coming to church, but they couldn't really understand anything, but they were here. Some of the younger kids were learning English. It was kind of interesting. They did not really, when you're a teenager learning English, guess what kind of words they really pick up? But they really don't know what they mean, so sometimes I would come on here, and we had a whiteboard over there, and guess what words I saw on the whiteboard? And so we had to do a little instruction on that one. But anyway, so for about 5 years, what we would do, we would have weekly Bible classes Sunday night in a Vietnamese house. And it started off by me sitting on the floor with a Bible storybook and with an interpreter, Mr. Vin, who became a very good friend. Mr. Vin would interpret. And we would go through the stories, and I still remember when we got to Cain and Abel, I was listening, and suddenly it became Cain and Mabel. I said, hold it, time out. It's Abel, not Mabel. One of the ones that were very vivid was when we studied the story of John the Baptist, and that he had to eat locusts. And these men started, the women did, they just started really talking fast. And, they don't go about 5 minutes and said, Mr. Vin, what's going on? You have to realize that almost all the men who came over here were in re-education camp in Vietnam, concentration camp. Okay, most of them were, because they helped the Americans. And so they were so excited because they thought John the Baptist was eating high on the hog, because in re-education camp they were so happy when the locusts came because they had meat to eat. And they call it flying shrimp. So I'm going, okay, we might have to adjust this story a little bit. But is Tasha here? No. I still remember one time, their weddings were fun. They would come down the street. The grooms would come to the bride's house, and we're all waiting at the bride's house. And the groom would come with family would come with all their presents, and this, usually a roasted pig. And Tasha was just about this high. And we were at this one time, and the pig was staring her right in the face. And she started crying, I think. I forget what. But learned a lot about their culture. Once in a while, we would go eat with them, and we would eat something. I would ask the interpreter, what are we eating now? And he'd say, you don't want to know. And Bonnie looked at me and said, do we have to eat it? I said, yes, we do. But then Pastor Kramer, who is just, except to call New Orleans, but he started Peace in Jesus, and he came his vicar year, I'm going to talk about the vicars in a second, but he came, and it was obvious immediately that he could pick up the language, and that he had a love for their culture. And so what he actually did, I think he might be one of the few vicars in the history of the synod that we made him stay another year. I always said he flunked. Made him stay another year, and he helped really get that going. Then he went to seminary for his final year, and we called him back, and that's where Peace and Jesus started. But again, you see the Lord's hand here calling him as a vicar who was just really good with the language. So, you know, so we started, really, we started 2 congregations and a separate ministry in our history, which is really kind of shows that we're an outreach church. As an outreach church, the building had to be changed. Like where Barb is sitting and Corey and those guys, you would be sitting among yucca plants when the church was first seen. That coming down there, that was the end wall of that was the end of the fellowship hall. The first expansion, we put on that wing. We also added, if you would go through that way where the cry room is, the women's room, that was a rose garden. Where you go to the furnaces, that was just a a sidewalk out to the back. You know, so we added there. We added into the front hall. If you go in the front hall, you see the bricks. They were on the outside of the church. So that was the outside. So the front hall was very small because the glass into the chapel was the same place. If you go over there, it was a very narrow front hall, so we added that on. Had a really good architect because I think he blended everything in quite well. So we did that, what was a major step. But then as I was reviewing the history, I kind of forget some of this stuff. At that time, while we're starting doing the Peace and Jesus, we kind of did Cross of Christ, we did the addition, we started the preschool. We all kind of did that within a period of 5-6 years. The preschool used to be held in the fellowship hall. Every Friday, it had to be broken down, set up for Bible class. Sunday night, put back together. How many of you remember the portable? Man, that was supposed to be temporary many, many years ago. How many of you remember Lenten suppers in the portable? Yeah, we would have, that's the only place we could have Lenten suppers. That was where we had adult classes during the week because this was preschool. We use that portable for everything, but we even had Lenten suppers over there, although there's no kitchens or bathrooms. We carted it over, remember that? That portable has seen a lot of stuff. Anyway, we did that expansion, and then we decided, and only 2 years later, we finished it, we decided to expand the chapel. If you go into the chapel, where you see the last wooden beam, that was the back wall of the chapel. If you go beyond that, a lot of people don't realize that, but the front part of the chapel is 2 feet higher than the original chapel. And the architect did that so it would not have the tunnel effect. And I think he did a really nice job on that. So we expanded the chapel within 2 years. How many of you remember, like at Christmas, we had the big black wall while we were working on the chapel? All we did is have plastic hanging down for about half a year. Yeah, Dave remembers. Yeah, we had that. You know, Dave and a few others, they did the kitchen. There was just a lot of work going on in that chapel. By the way, trivia question. There's 2 different types of pews in the chapel. The somewhat comfortable ones in the back and the torturous ones in the front. Why are there 2 different types of pews in the chapel? Trivia question. Anybody know?
We have to buy new pews and we
Forget the word new.
Yeah, new to us.
Additional. the first set of pews, and where they are going now is a little deceptive because they did not go that far in the original chapel because we didn't have the AV booth or anything, so the pews were all the way to the back wall. So, where they are now was, where they end now was probably part where the altar was, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, the back pews we got from a Baptist church, so they're Baptist pews. Okay? That's why they got the little circles in there for communion cups because, Now the front pews, we got off eBay from a monastery in New York. And monks never have it comfortable. So we bought them from a monastery in New York. And we bought it, and again, a lot of work to try to blend them in, and everything. Quite amazing how those two went together. So either you're in Baptist pews or Catholic pews. We really never dedicated them for Lutherans, so maybe we should do that on the 50th anniversary. Or maybe get rid of them.
Standing room only.
Yeah. So, I'm just looking here at my notes. What did I miss so far? Any questions so far?
Pastor, we used to have a communion rail too with kneeling pads.
Yep.
And we had to kneel when we took.
Yeah, that was in the old. Yep. So we had the communion wheel and kneeling pads, and man, there's more. I'm not going to say fights, but there's more strong arguments over non-doctrinal issues in churches than doctrinal issues. I still remember how much discussions we had on what type of kneeling pads to get. We would try them out, throw them away, I don't know. There was a whole lot of discussion on those kneeling pads. I kind of forgot about that. Yeah. So really, the chapel, probably the original chapel, you could maybe, I don't think you could squeeze 100 in there, maybe. It was pretty small. I mean, if you think about that back wall and you put an altar in front of that and so forth, it was pretty small.
It was right at 100 from what I remember.
I think,
Because when we did the addition, it basically doubled.
yeah, and I think you will really have to squeeze to get the 100 in, so. Any other thoughts?
You mentioned briefly about Vickers.
We're going into that.
What, I can't remember, because I remember coming in right at the beginning of this, the altar wasn't raised up like it is now.
There was one,
Yeah, it was like one step, wasn't
Right,
it? And
yeah.
that was about
that was it. Well, you didn't really have to raise it because we were so close to everybody.
Right.
And we had a big pulpit, good sized pulpit and everything. It got pretty tight pretty fast. And so that's why we decided, I can't remember, and again, I just want to emphasize this because how good God is. Like I said, we started to think about that building project right when we started Cross of Christ with a lot of our giving went over there. And so there was a lot of discussion, can we do this? Because this costs money, I can't remember. But I remember we put a thermometer in the front hall and said we're going to raise money. And we started off, it was just like you could barely see, But we decided to start building. And I still remember to this day how the week after we said we're going to do this, a young couple came in, members, very unexpectedly came with a check of $80,000. Unbeknownst to me, the husband was part of the .com. He made a killing, in a sense. But very humble people, never expected them. And I say, the Lord is good. The Lord is really good. And so throughout all this, we sat there, and a lot of times we took a step of faith without really, John's going to talk about the future planning. That's breaking the pattern from the past. No, we did planning, but we often said, okay, let's try it and see what happens. Roy?
You didn't mention sound booths.
Yeah.
They used to have everything over by the,
Oh, yeah, our sound booth was actually the corner there. We had a little table, a little desk with a computer and everything. And everything was right there. Person just sat there within the church, right in the corner, and that. So yeah, it was quite a bit different. So I think that the theme is, we have a history of outreach in our congregation, and to support that outreach, that's why we did this building. And I would say the same thing with the preschool and the family ministry center. Why are we doing that? To reach more people, right? So it's continuing. The next theme I kind of want to hit is that throughout our history, we've been very connected to synod. The vicars, you get an extra cup of coffee, you can name all the vicars in order. No. Pastor Kramer was our first vicar. Anybody remember who our second vicar was? By the way, vicars are like interns. They're student pastors. So in the first half of the year, they had to wear a sign, student pastor in training, be patient. I had the congregation trained. Whenever the new vicar came, they would come for 1 year. Whenever the new vicar would come, I would introduce them in Bible class, and they're all nervous and everything, and I would just say, by the way, what does vicar mean in the Greek language? And the whole Bible class would say, slave. I had them trained well. No. But most of these vicars were paid for by synod. They did start a program, Vicars in Missions, at the time. It was brand new. And so a lot of these would support, they wanted to get vicars in mission settings. So we had about 8 vicars, I think, I can't remember. Pastor Kramer, Steve Hilmer, Jason Ewert. After Jason came Bill Monday. And then Carl Vanderhoof, Caleb Davidson. 7, I think. Yeah. Those are we had 7 vicars. Couple trivia facts about the vicars. What vicar came to our Halloween party dressed as a human piñata and got beat up by the little boys with plastic bats? Bill Monday! Remember that? He came and they just started walking him. But it fits him. We had great vicars. We had tremendous vicars. Another vicar thing, what vicar took our youth group down to the Apache Reservation on a mission trip, and he had to fly back to Seattle for some reason for a meeting, and he flew with rental car keys in his pocket. And it cost $150 just to get somebody out to the Apache Reservation. And back then, that probably would be like $500 now. That was Steve Hilmer. Were you down there?
Yes.
Yeah. Whenever we said goodbye to vicars, we remembered these things. But they were really, we were always blessed. Every vicar was married, right? We didn't have any single vicars. Every vicar was married, and what was so great about them, and I know Pastor Grant has talked to me about them, and I'm going to encourage maybe Messiah to think, going back to the Vicars in Mission, this would be a tremendous place for a vicar to come. It's a great thing. I think it's good for the congregation. I don't think it's that good for the pastor. But why? I'm going to talk to Sharon, for example. If you always have student teachers, they're a lot of work. And what I always say about the first half year, they're a lot of work. The second half year, they really help you. But then they're gone. And next year, you got to start it. the one thing that the congregation has to realize, they are not a staffing solution. Because in a sense, they give more work to the pastor than less work. Even though they're great to have, I still have a great relationship with all my vicars and stuff. They're great to have, but you have to realize the first part of the year, they got their training wheels on yet, in a sense.
I was just telling Tasha, I remember the vicars coming, when we would be here from Colorado, the vicars coming over to your house to, you would talk to them about their sermons. You just whip out your red pen. It's like you murdered somebody on the paper.
They usually, both vicars gave me a red pen as a going away present. One vicar, forget which one, I still have it, actually gave me a dartboard with all their pictures on it. We always had a good time. At the end of the year, I had to make a report. So the vicar and his wife would come over. Part of their requirement, they would have to supply the adult beverage. And I got to pick it. No. And then we would have a great meal. I would have steaks and stuff. And then we would sit down, and I would do their report and tell them everything I'm going to tell them, and we would discuss it. And as you can tell, most of the reports were pretty positive, But it was just a really nice thing to do. I have to tell you this one story. He's a good friend, so I don't think he'll mind. One thing I always said, they're vicars, they're not perfect, so one of my jobs was to say where they could improve. I always said that. And Bill Mundy would come over. I said, Bill, one of the things you really need to work on is you're not good at accepting constructive criticism. Because he would really fight back. And so he fought back, he talked to me about 10 or 15 minutes. And his wife, Lori, remember Lori Monday? She just looked at him and said, Bill, you're proving his point. But no, it was great. The vicars were good. So, with Pastor Grant, I'm going to encourage looking ahead. Maybe that's something Messiah can get back into. The other thing is, Messiah probably, I think, is the only congregation in the history of the Synod, and we're connected to the Synod, that had at one time the chairman of Home Missions and then the chairman of World Missions. I don't think any other congregation has ever had those two chairmen as their pastors. I was chairman of Home Missions, that means of North America, and English-speaking Caribbean. I could never understand that one, but English-speaking Caribbean and North America. And then Pastor Mulkey was chairman of World Missions. Because of that, then we often got either vicars or pastors coming in to help. And again, the Synod would pay for those because those were time-consuming jobs. And so that's where a lot of times we had associate pastors. I think, I haven't examined that board real closely out there. I think they have a picture of every pastor, right? So if you want information about the pastors, the board is out there. But I think every pastor's on there over the years. So we've been over the years, we've been very connected to our church body, to Wells. That's going to continue, I think, too. But just probably want to put a plug in to seriously consider maybe the Vicars of Mission. Although it's a little bit different now, I think the congregation has to pay more than previously. But
I was just brainstorming with Jeff, where would we house one? His idea is let's run plumbing to our portable building at Vicarage.
what, do they need plumbing?
Outhouse.
Or your garage. I don't know exactly what all the logistics are these days for paying for them. I do know congregations have to pick up a lot bigger tax. Well, we
still have the Vicar and Mission program, though,
right,
which subsidizes it to certain degrees.
Right. So, So, yeah. And probably the last theme I want to really hit, and then if we have time, open up for any questions. I think the other theme, so the themes I would say over the years, we've got outreach church, we've been connected to Synod, and then the last one I'm going to just hit is that we've been, over the years, pretty innovative or flexible in what we do. We have tried various things, some not very good, some okay. Do any of you realize, some of you will remember this, Rhonda was for sure, but right around 2000, 2001, we actually had a real praise band. Yeah, you remember? Asher, I should ask that for a trivia question. Asher, do you know that they actually took a trip to Portland to do a service in the district president's church because they wanted the district to see it? Back then, there was hardly any praise bands, at least Lutheran
And
praise
did we,
band.
it wasn't really, it was very controversial too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
lots of,
Well, even back then, our second service was quite a bit different than the second service is now, and that was very controversial too. But we took about a year and a half to study it, to talk to the congregation before we made that decision. So back then, the first service and the second service were completely different. We had two different bulletins, two different services, completely different. I think Tasha will remember this. When we first started the praise band, we had the teens up there with the overhead projector. And when the words, they would kind of slide the new plastic sheets over the overhead projector because we had nothing else. So the teens always did that, right, Tasha? Yeah. Yeah. I remember also, I don't know how old you were, Tasha, when you were a song leader and you fainted up there.
yeah, yeah.
About 16.
Yeah, I just called one of the ushers, take her away, I continued.
That's exactly right.
Exactly right.
That's actually right. Yeah.
What?
She's a distraction, get her away.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Lord. At one time, Rick, you would be interested, we had a Lutherans for Life group here. We had Lutherans for Life, a pro-life group, and one speaker we had, and we were doing it, Cross Christ as it started, so this was the late 90s. Any of you old Idahoans remember Helen Chenoweth?
Yes.
What was she?
She was a congressman.
Yeah, and she spoke to our Lutherans for Life. She was one of our speakers. Yep. Helen Chenoweth was one of our speakers at our Lutherans for Life, the congresswoman from our district, U.S. Congresswoman. We had that for a while. We actually had, I forgot what we called it, but it was basically like an AA group for addiction at one time. Because at one time, again, when you reach out a lot, you get a lot of people with problems, which is good, but then you got to deal with them, right? Help them. And so we had our own AA group. We had something called the Barnabas Society at one time. Anybody remember what they did?
It's like cards out to people.
It was a group of people. Barnabas was to be an encourager. And so they would get together, it was mostly older people, but they would send cards out to people, they would make phone calls, they would actually visit people at times before, because one time we didn't have any ladies groups, women's groups, so they would actually do like some of the meals at times, they would be doing that, but every month they would meet and we would go through who of our members or our prospects need some encouragement.
It wasn't just old people on Barnabas, because Kelly Goodman and I were on it.
Oh.
We weren't old then.
I'm sorry. No, but I mean, it was a good group.
It was a good group.
It was a good group. Another group that I really enjoyed that we had for a while was a support group for parents of teenagers. And that was really fun. I still remember the night. We had the teens role play the parents and the parents role played the teens. Man, did you learn a lot. I think both groups learned a lot too, but we role played. Jeannie Baker, Robert and Jeannie Baker. I still remember Jeannie Baker playing her teenage son.
Which one?
Aaron. Aaron. Oh, man. Anyway, that was good for a while. I think it really helped some of those parents. We also, at one time, I think Ken remembers this, we had a special Bible class that meant twice a month, outreach Bible class, we called it, where people who would doing witnessing in their friendships or stuff, they would come, we would do a Bible study. Every person would report on who they're trying to witness to. We would pray for them. We go to the next person, and hold each other a little bit accountable. But we would study how to reach out. We did that for a while, outreach Bible class, a Bible class just for outreach. Kids church, that, I was going to ask Jenny, and I forgot exactly when that started. That was when Howie was here, he came in 2008. I think it was by like 2010, 2011, in that range. Okay. What was, again, being a little bit more innovative, there's only were a couple kids church going in our whole church body at the time. We went down to Phoenix Crosswalk where they did it. But the way we did it was more like a glorified Sunday school. It wasn't really a worship service. So when they came back, Jeff, you went down there.
Yep.
Right. It was more like a glorified Sunday school, right?
Correct, yep.
And we came back and said, no, we're going to do a worship service. And I think that was brand new in the church body at the time, doing a worship service. Yeah, who went down with you, Jeff? You and Howie?
I believe Jenny, I'm almost positive was there.
Maybe Jenny did too?
Rhonda as well.
Rhonda went with us, yeah.
Four of you.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, again, we took an idea and we changed it a little bit.
And we had a lot of the Northwest and everybody was really interested in that program.
Yeah, and
They
yeah.
wanted us to teach them.
You'd be surprised over the years how much correspondence, I think, came this way because of what we were doing, asking questions on various things. So I think another theme I would like to say is that in our history, Messiah's been innovative, flexible. And when we tried something and it didn't work, we killed it pretty quick. We were not afraid to say, hey, this ain't good, and let's kill it. But through all this, the big theme I want to say is about if I look back, I stand in amazement at what God has done. Because you look at this, there would be no way that you would expect Messiah to be where it is today. Starting a couple new churches, a ministry, basically our third edition, the growth we had and everything. So that's the theme. But we got a couple minutes, maybe not. Is that the official clock?
Who cares is what it says.
Who cares? I don't know if we put that out
You
there.
got 2 minutes.
But
You got 2 minutes. I
2
know
minutes,
that.
8 questions. Or else he's going to talk for 2
Or
minutes.
really 5. You can have 5 minutes.
Or we could be done. Oh,
6 if you have the strength.
Weren't we kind of innovative with our audio visual and stuff?
Yeah, in the beginning we
People
were.
were looking,
we were pretty innovative then, and then we kind of rested on our laurels for a while, and now we kind of got to get back up to speed on some of that. Yeah, we
This
were.
computer that we're using for live streaming today is a relic of the past. So.
Oh, and needs to be buried, right? So, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, there's probably more things I could think about, but I just try to hit the highlights. Any other questions before we close?
What made the band controversial?
Well, at that time, in our church body, it wasn't done. And secondly, our church body, almost everything was done, the liturgy, the front part of the body, hymnal, the order of service, which is still pretty predominant in our church body. And because of that, we were not singing hymns. We were not using the liturgy. When we started, we would do kind of like how many churches do have like 20 or 25 minutes of just singing in the beginning. That's how we did it. And then a message. I know Terry, one thing we really liked, if some of you remember, is we had the praise time, the message time, and then we had prayer time. And sometimes we would get like over 20 prayer requests. and we would take them individually. Because we say, this is where we're gonna work, in a sense. You know, we didn't stand for prayer. But, you know, every prayer request would come, and a lot of times people would just, you know, raise their hand and say, hey, pray for this. And I know, especially I remember Terry, how much she loved that, but other people, you know, love that. We really tried to break into 3 parts that way, so.
I think the big class, I know we still have them,
Yeah.
but in my mind, the big class was huge back in those days.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, people, members went.
Yeah, what we usually would do, we would have a Bible information class. We were scheduled 3 a year. And before each one, we would advertise them. I would go to a lot of the members and say, who are you inviting this time? And they had 3 months to invite them to the next one. And so we averaged 20 to 30 people on big class. 15 maybe were members and 15 non-members. You know, about 50-50. And so each big class had 20 to 30 people in it. And they were fun.
Yeah.
All of you remember Becky
Yeah.
Detro? Oh, was she a hoot in Bible information class. I remember one time I asked the question, when would it be a sin to dance? And she yelled out, when you're naked on top of the table.
It got flagged on YouTube.
So anyway, that's enough. That's my walk down memory lane. God is good. Let's close with a prayer. Oh Lord, we look back in the past, we see tremendous blessings. We come to you thankful, but also confident that you will continue to do this in the present and the future. Continue to let Messiah be a shining light of your love into our community. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.